I want to talk about the male loneliness epidemic. That seems to be a big thing out there on the inner tubes nowadays. I didn't know that there was a male loneliness epidemic. I was not under the impression that I was any more lonely than anybody else. I mean, I am a male. Am I lonely? No, but I don't know. Apparently, this is a big problem with a lot of the young men out there nowadays. I can kind of identify. You know, we are starting to see kind of a rise in things like, say, the manosphere. And what I'm hearing from people is that, well, modern sort of life is not fulfilling the needs of young men nowadays. And especially like feminist, liberal, progressive causes and culture does not speak to males, to young males. And so they're starting to turn towards people like Andrew Tate, for example. They're starting to turn towards the toxic masculinity influence peddlers. And that's why we're seeing like a rise in all of these people. You know, people like Andrew Tate, people like fucking Matt Walsh, and all of these other morons. Like, young men feel like they don't have any answers. They're spending more time alone. They're not getting in relationships, that kind of thing. So this is where they're turning to in order to express some of this rage or whatever. And I can kind of understand that. I mean, that is kind of true. I can understand that nowadays it is hard to meet people. You know, we live during a time where people are sort of isolating themselves to online spaces and whatnot. You know, basically existing in an online space is not the same thing as going out and having actual face-to-face relationships. It's not the same thing. You know, it's a close analog, right? Going on a website or a forum or something and shitposting or something like that. It's an analog, but it's not close to the same. No. It's a poor substitution, I think, for actual face-to-face interactions. I could totally agree with that 100%. And here's the thing about it, folks, right? The older you get, the harder it is to meet people, not just women. Okay, because if you look at what these guys are saying, 99% of it is these guys are just not getting laid. And so you have like incels and shit. That's what we're talking about. Right? 99% of it is just guys not getting girlfriends, not getting partners. And they equate that with being lonely. And it's because of toxic masculinity. That's why they're doing it. Right? That's what it is. Because what is loneliness exactly? Is loneliness not... It's not just not being in a relationship. Right? Loneliness is not having anyone to talk to or to be with or to have fun with. And you don't need someone of the opposite sex in order to not be lonely. It's just having friends in general. If you have a best friend and your best friend is another guy, there's nothing wrong with that. We all grew up as children with friends of the same sex, did we not? I did. I don't know about you. So what is it about being an adult that, you know, makes having a bromance so much different than when you're, say, 17 and you're hanging out with your best guy friend? What's different? Why is it different when you're 35? I mean, shouldn't be. If you think about it, it really shouldn't be, and it kind of isn't. But this is what the guys out there who are complaining about being lonely, this is what they're talking about. They're not talking about having other guy friends. They're talking about not having girlfriends. And that's what it is. That's why guys are going to people like Matt Walsh and Andrew Tate and all that. It's not about loneliness per se. It's about maybe their dick is lonely. Right? So that's the first, it's a misconception here. So one thing I'm seeing in all of these videos out there, there's lots of videos and such where people are like pushing back against this, pushing back against feminism, saying that all the women and feminists and stuff don't give a fuck about male problems, right? Here's a thing I found on Reddit, and I know this is just, you know, this is just an anecdote, but whatever. This is actually in Vosh's forum on Reddit. Damn, I didn't know men are a monolith that once some men do something, the entire group should be held accountable. Thanks, self-titled Twitter feminist. The epidemic of loneliness. It's all very funny when male loneliness is called an epidemic, while men say to women, you will live alone with your cats and dogs and you will die. After you die, they will start eating your corpse. These men humiliate women for being lonely but want empathy for their own loneliness. And this, of course, is somebody pushing back against this, saying that, oh, this woman is being mean. Well, here's the thing about it. She's kind of right, this person here. Whoever this is, Shine, I don't even know who this person is. Because the men that are complaining about the epidemic of male loneliness are the exact same people who, for example, like to say that women hit a wall when they turn 30. Right? They're the exact same people who often judge women according to an attractiveness scale that they just sort of pull out of their ass and say, oh, well, this woman has whatever bone facial structure and upturned nose and blah, 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 and that subtracts X number of points from the attractiveness scale. Like, the same kind of guys that say that shit are the ones complaining about being lonely. The same kind of guys who are like, you know, saying that, oh, I'm an incel and all this other crap and, you know, femoids, that kind of thing. And I'm a high value man and I don't want to date a woman with a huge body count, you know, that kind of thing. These are the guys complaining about being lonely. The women, you know, the guys who are saying that I'm not going to date a woman who's not a virgin, even though I'm 35 years old or whatever. And it's like, you know, and I want a 18-year-old girl, or sometimes they want women who are even younger. That's another thing. Huge number of fucking pedophiles amongst this group of high-value men, right? Anyway, but yeah, same kind of thing. Same kind of guys who are like, they have these like super strict like standards where I'm only going to date, you know, X, Y, and they have to meet all this like ridiculous bullshit criteria, and they can't be feminists, and they have to stay home and do nice things and cook for me and all this other crap, and they have to be a traditional trad wife woman, all this other shit. They're the men who are bitching and moaning about being lonely. It's because this thing they're searching for, this perfect traditional trad wife woman who is a virgin and has remained a virgin, but will also have sex with them on the first date and will like have sex with them on command. Like, this woman doesn't exist. It's a thing that they've all sort of made up, that they're all searching for. It doesn't exist. It's bullshit. It was always bullshit. There never was this sort of this trad wife thing that these guys are putting on a pedestal that they all want. Like, that never existed ever. And even if during the time when you could conceivably claim that it existed, the women were miserable when they were forced to live like that. Back in the day when women were forced to marry men, they didn't have a choice. It's even like that in some countries around this earth. You know, let's not forget that that's not a thing that's gone everywhere in the world. I mean, it's gone here in the West, here in the United States, here in Europe, in Canada, and like that kind of thing. But there are other places on this earth where no, arranged marriages very much are a thing, where men are expected to abuse their wives, to beat them when they step out of line, for example. And it's perfectly okay for the man to go off and have like 17 mistresses, but if the woman gets caught in an adulterous relationship, she can be murdered. She can be stoned to death. And even if the woman just doesn't like return the man's affections, the man wants to marry her and she doesn't marry him, he can get away, he could throw acid in her face. and scar her for the rest of her life and not go to prison for it. That exists in this world now. In Africa, in the Middle East, especially in the Middle East. It's very bad in places like, Saudi Arabia and Jordan, Pakistan, India. Story after story after story about young girls being gang raped in India. Gang raped in India because they dared to go against what their brother's wishes were, or they didn't want to be in an arranged marriage with someone they've never met, or something like that. That's what a traditional fucking trad wife is. That's what these motherfuckers want here. They want that culture here. They want to be able to basically enforce their will on women, and women to not have a fucking choice about it. Here's another one, another little tweet, a tweet I found. This is from, I don't even know who this person is, but I want to kind of point this one out. Let's just read this. A key difference in how the male loneliness epidemic versus the rape and domestic violence crisis is discussed. Male loneliness is assumed to be a shared responsibility, a collective impediment, while the relentless and increasing sexual violence against women and girls isn't. Follows up, and the male loneliness epidemic is disingenuous rebranding of a push to compulsory sexuality. They don't use data measuring loneliness. They're using data about sexual activity. And that's exactly what the quote-unquote male loneliness thing is all about. She's whoever this person is. I don't even know who this is. I just found this on Twitter, right? Wadagate Wajuki or whatever. I don't know. I'm going to probably follow her because she's 100% correct. Right here. That's exactly what it is. It's not something that men take responsibility for themselves. But if there's an epidemic of male loneliness out there, right, what are men doing about it? Are they starting social clubs and shit? Are they starting groups where you can go and meet people, that kind of thing? Are they making it easier for people to go out and meet other people? No, they're not doing. They're sitting at home, bitching and moaning and complaining about it. It's because they're blaming women for the fact that they can't meet anybody. That's what they're doing. And then the other thing that she says is that, rebranding of a push to compulsory sexuality. That's exactly what it is. Because every time you see a guy complaining about how he's lonely, the first thing he starts off with is the fact that he has not been in a relationship for a long time or ever. That's the first thing they say. I'm 22 years old, I'm lonely, I've never had a girlfriend. Something like that. I'm 32, I'm lonely, I haven't had a girlfriend in 12 years. That's the first thing that they say. It's like, well, you're not lonely, you're horny. Are there other people in your life? Do you have friends? Do you have family? Do you have other guy friends? No, you're not lonely. There's people for you to fucking talk to. What you are is horny. Here's the other thing. I will admit one thing here is that having female companionship is awesome. I will say that, and I will agree 100%. Having female companionship is in many ways superior to male companionship. But that's not what loneliness is all about. I mean, I guess that's a certain kind of loneliness, but so that's the thing. And then what she also says here, male loneliness is assumed to be a shared responsibility. That's exactly right. It's like, why are we putting the onus on women to address male loneliness? Right? How about this? If you're lonely, how about you go outside and meet people? Because that's what you have to do. And that's what's going on nowadays. We are increasingly segregating people into smaller and smaller online spaces. And that's what's happening, right? And there's two effects there. There's that, there's the fact that people are spending more time online, on Facebook, on social media, stuff like that, on YouTube, whatever. And they're finding it a poor substitution for real face-to-face interactions. And that's true. That's exactly what it is. It is a poor substitution. It's also natural as you get older for you to just not have as many friends. That's just a natural thing that happens. As you get older, it becomes harder and harder to meet people. Your friends that you had when you were a kid, they either grow up and move away, or they go off to wherever, they go to college, they get married and stuff like that. They spend more time with their families, less time hanging out with the fellas boozing it or whatever. Right. that kind of thing. And that's just a natural thing that happens. And it becomes harder to actually meet people because, as I don't know about you, but the older I get, I kind of don't want to meet people. Like, you don't have time to meet people anymore. It's like you work, you come home, you have a certain amount of time every day. Do I really want to like fucking spend my time like going out trying to like meet new friends? It's like, no, you don't give a fuck. I'd rather stay home and watch TV. You know what I mean? But still, but the thing is that you still find that you need to have interactions with people. You need to, because it's not a substitute to just stay home and post on the internet all day, shit post on 4chan or whatever. It's a poor substitute for real life interactions. And so it's healthy also to have friends, to people that you can talk to, that people that you can have fun with. But that's not what these guys are looking for. These guys are looking for companionship. And that's the difference between just being a friend and then having a companion that you can confide in, that you can trust, that you can talk to, that you can show emotion with, that kind of thing. And men only really feel comfortable showing that kind of intimacy, sharing that kind of intimacy with women, with a partner, with a romantic partner specifically. They do not feel comfortable sharing that kind of intimacy with other men. Women don't have that problem. Women are perfectly fine sharing intimacy with other women that they're not even involved with romantically. Just, whatever, female friends. They're totally cool with that. Men are not. Why? Because of toxic masculinity. Right? That's why. That's 100% why. And that's exactly what it is. There are things that I would never talk to with even my closest male friends. Never. There are things I would never fucking say to them. Ever, ever, ever. Why? Because of toxic masculinity. And here's the thing. I know that there are things that if I were to come out and say these things to these guys, they'd probably be cool with it. They'd probably be like, yeah, okay, whatever. But why? It would be weird and awkward because of toxic masculinity. And that's what it is. And I fully admit that. And, admitting, the first step to addressing the problem is admitting that you have the problem. And it's not my problem specifically. It's a problem with our culture. Right? Even though I know that, my close male friends, I have 2 or 3 of them that I could probably call and have a deep heart-to-heart with, and I could admit all kinds of shit that I'm afraid of admitting, and I know that each one of them would be totally cool and supportive with me. I still wouldn't fucking do it. I wouldn't do it if my life depended on it because of male toxic masculinity. I know they wouldn't do it either, right? And that's just, you can expect that from your friends and your buddies. You know what the most you can expect from your best male friend that you have, the best one that you have, the guy that you would throw yourself in front of a train for. The best you can expect is for him to just be cool and supportive and not be a dick to you if you show weakness. That's the best you can expect, right? I wouldn't expect any fucking more. I wouldn't sit there and be like, okay, I need to talk to you about this or that. I'm going crazy, whatever, blah, blah, blah. I wouldn't lay that shit on my best friend. I wouldn't do that. I would do it for my wife, but not my best friend. That's toxic masculinity at work. And that's just how it is. Like I said, women don't have that problem. Women are totally cool going to their best female friends and saying all the fucking shit that they have, all the problems they have, laying it all out, right? Expressing all the emotions they need to, crying and being vulnerable. Any guy, I know, and the thing is, I know all you men out there watching this, because something like 95% of my audience is male. YouTube tells you this stuff, right? I know you know what I'm talking about. Even if you happen to have a close male friend that you can confide shit in like this, and you're totally cool and you have that relationship, you still know what I'm talking about. You still know that, yeah, it is not normal for men to express emotions the same way that women do. And that is because of our culture. That is 100%. That's not a fault with any given male person, any man. That's not a fault with any man. That's not because of, whatever, you're brainwashed by whatever. No, none of that shit. That's just the culture we live in. So what needs to change is the culture. We need to make it okay for men to express themselves, because that's the difference between friendship and companionship. Friend is a guy you can hang out with, have fun, blah blah blah, go get some burgers and brews or whatever, talk about whatever the fuck you talk about. I don't know, sports, movies, footballs, whatever the fuck it is. That's a friend, right? Companionship is somebody that you can have deep emotional resonance with, and men are not capable, I won't say not capable, but our culture does not allow for men to do that with someone who they're not in a romantic relationship with. There you go. That's a much better explanation. So I want to show something I found here. This is Matt Walsh. Matt Walsh is going to talk about the male loneliness epidemic. And this is 12 minutes long, but what we're going to do, we're going to put this at 1.5 speed, so it'll only be 6 minutes, because I can't stand more than 6 minutes of fucking Matt Walsh's stupid fucking beard. Doesn't his beard is like a different color than his hair. It's like, do you dye that shit, or is it like a paste on kind of thing? I think he probably dyes it. Anyway, just to get the perspective of the right-wing fascist MAGA chud assholes who are the people who are actually complaining about being lonely, we're going to go to Matt Walsh, because when I think asshole, I think Matt Walsh. I think he speaks for all of them. So we're going to listen to what he's got to say about, we're going to listen to and critique what he has to say about the male loneliness, quote-unquote, epidemic.
Here's one corporate media outlet that is willing to acknowledge some of the struggles men face, but the prescription they offer is downright terrible. It would be hilarious if the issue wasn't so dire. This article that was just published comes from the Washington Post, and it's written by a woman, of course, and it's impressive in one sense, which is that it manages to reach exactly the wrong diagnosis on every single aspect of the problem. The article is called "Men's Groups Are Embracing an Alternative Conception of American Masculinity." Now, the whole thing reads like a parody, so if you're able...
Okay. I don't see why it's wrong for a woman to write an article about men's male, masculinity and all that. I mean, if there's anybody who's an expert in toxic male masculinity, it would be a woman who has to put up with that shit all of the time. Wouldn't you say? It is healthy to get an outside perspective on these things sometimes, I guess is what I would respond. My response to Matt Walsh's point here is that because what I just said is true. Men only confide in women when it comes to stuff like this, and then half of the men out there can't even fucking do that. They still consider it too weak to be emotional about anything or whatever. You have to be stoic. That's another thing that conservative men always fucking... The conservative notion of masculinity is men have to be stoic and unemotional and make the... that's the only way that you can make the right decisions to survive and all that shit. It's like, why don't we listen to the people who are the victims of this kind of ridiculous toxic masculinity once in a while, huh? But let's listen to what the man has to say.
You should check it out immediately. I can't recommend it highly enough. The Washington Post wants to give us the real story about why men are lonely and how best to combat that epidemic. And what's their suggestion? Well, just to summarize, basically, they say that dudes should lie around doing breathing exercises and smelling incense while some guy named Rua gropes them and whispers stuff like this, quote, "I invite you to maybe bring up an intention, how you want to live in this world, how you want to love in this world, how you want to be in this world." That's not an exaggeration. That's a direct quote from the article. The men's groups that are the article profiles are not, these aren't Bible studies or flag football leagues, the kinds of men's groups that men would actually want to join. No, these are new age, touchy-feely group hugs where men learn how to get in touch with their feminine side.
All right. Now, I am going to say something unprecedented and say that, yes, I do agree with Matt Walsh here. I agree with this in this sense, is that your average guy who is a victim of male toxic masculinity. Male toxic. I guess I didn't need the word male there. But the average person, the average man who is a victim of toxic masculinity, yes, will not go for a touchy-feely new age group. And will listen to the kind of thing that he just said and say, this is bullshit. What am I doing here? This is stupid. I feel like an idiot. That is completely 100% true. What Matt Walsh just said right there. I don't agree with the other thing where he said, no, it's the kind of things that men want to join, like Bible studies or, you know, what was the other thing, you know, football leagues or whatever. It's like, what? Like, I don't know why that's like, why is it tough to play football or, you know, I guess Bible study. Like, okay, Bible study, you can link that in with the touchy new age shit. Right? That's just his fucking like idiot Christian shit fucking coming out there. But he is true in that sense. He's true that because here's the thing about toxic masculinity. Toxic masculinity is all about not looking weak. That's what it's about. It's shit you learn when you're a kid to keep yourself from getting made fun of or beaten up. And the kids who don't learn the basics of toxic masculinity when they're in grade school, they become the victims of bullies. If you don't learn how to be tough, then other kids are going to take advantage of you because they had kids take advantage of them, so on and so forth. And then you go home when you're a kid and you just got beat up your second day of school. That's a true story. That actually happened to me. The very second day of school I ever went to school, I got my ass kicked. Right? And you know, and you're like, somebody beat me up, whatever, and you're crying. And what does your dad say to you? He doesn't say, okay, well, the next time these kids show up, go get a teacher and stop them. He doesn't say that. He doesn't say, like, you know, run away, whatever, protect yourself. He says, kick them in the nuts, is what your dad tells you. Right. And in some sense, this is where it comes from. It comes from survival. Because in real life out there, people are fucking terrible and will take advantage of your ass, and you need to learn how to protect yourself. Whether that's physically or just, you know, protecting yourself is actually a mental thing. Stand up for yourself. It's not every altercation when you fight with somebody. It's not always going to be in the street fighting for survival. It's standing up for yourself is a thing that everybody needs to learn. And this is what your dad's trying to teach you when he says, kick him in the nuts. But this is what you learn. But when you're a kid, if you don't learn that lesson the right way, if you don't learn how to stand up for yourself the right way, that turns into toxic masculinity. The idea that you always have to be tough about everything. You have to be stoic, right? You can't show any weakness at all. Just showing weakness is the same thing as losing, as being a loser, as getting your ass beat. You can see this theme going all throughout conservative thought. This is why conservatives never apologize. Donald Trump never apologizes for anything, ever. Conservative politicians never apologize. They always give that sort of, well, I'm sorry you feel that way kind of thing. Or I'm sorry my actions were perceived that way. They all do it. Even the women do it. Lauren Boebert, last week, we had that, you know, that whole thing where she got caught giving fucking some dude a hand job when they were watching Beetlejuice. And then her bullshit non-apology was like, oh, well, I didn't intend this, but I'm sorry that my actions were perceived that way. That's what she said in her apology. Same kind of fucking thing. That's toxic masculinity. This idea that showing even the smallest amount of weakness is, like, bad. And what ends up happening is that these people equate emotion with weakness. Showing any kind of emotion at all is weakness. What do trolls want to get out of you when they taunt you online and stuff, when they fuck with you online? What are trolls trying to do? They're trying to get a reaction. They're trying to get a reaction because then they can make fun of you. Oh, you got triggered. How many times have you been like arguing with some guy online and he says, well, I'm sorry, this is triggering you or whatever, or stop getting triggered, blah, 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 blah. Because that's what it's all about. It's about getting that rise out of you. It's about, because then you admit to showing weakness. Oh, you actually care about something. You're triggered about something. You're weak. I automatically win. So yeah, I agree with Matt Walsh in that sense, is that whatever it is, men won't do it because of toxic male, and this is because of toxic masculinity. So they're not going to do it if they think it's going to make them look weak because of toxic masculinity. Moving on.
Later in the session, that is being documented there by the article, the men start screaming and sobbing and crying and letting their emotions, quote, flow freely as they are, quote, released into the darkness. Now, the article goes on to quote a bunch of experts who, quote unquote, experts, who all say the familiar things about how men are lonely and lost because of...
See, did you catch that? Did you catch that? He just equated, you know, he didn't say anything negative about that, did he? He just, it was his mocking tone as, you know, the men are releasing their emotions into the darkness or whatever. The way that he said it was just mocking enough that this is bad, this is horrible, this makes men look weak. Right there. The thing is, I don't even think Matt Walsh realizes that. I don't even think he understands that what he just said is the absolute sort of proof that his worldview is incredibly toxic. Why is it wrong for a man to show emotion? Why is that wrong? It's perfectly fine to show emotion to your wife, to your girlfriend, right? But not too much. Not too much. Oh no. If you cry in front of your girlfriend, she might dump you or something because you're weak or whatever. No, you're only allowed to cry ever. If you're a man, you're only allowed to cry when someone dies, but only like your mother. Like you can cry if your mother dies or like your wife dies. Everybody else, you're not allowed to cry. Your dad dies, too bad, don't cry. You know, your dog dies, you better not fucking cry. Whatever. Your whole family wiped out in a car accident. Is your mom there? She's alive, then you better not cry. Because then you'll be weak. Right? That's it. This is the only time you're allowed to show emotion. Somebody dies, or like, you can show tears of joy if you like, you know, your children are born. Then you're allowed to cry tears of joy. That's it. No other fucking reason to show emotion. Everything else, you just have to just be like, I don't know, stoic and shit. Or else you might as well be wearing a dress. That's what Matt Walsh is fucking saying right here. Continuing.
Toxic masculinity that encourages us to be too stoic and too reserved and so forth. It laments the, quote, cowboy mentality that has allegedly contributed to the problem. Now, the masculinity expert who coined that phrase about the cowboy mentality is a woman named Niobe Way. And she, of course, quickly identifies the real victims in the story of male loneliness. Can you guess who the real victims are? Who's most put upon by male loneliness? Well, Niobe says it's women. Think of the women. Men are lonely. Women most impacted.
Based. 100% true. 100% true. Because these lonely men or whatever are like basically using their girlfriends and their wives as free fucking therapy. Because they can't like express their emotions, and then also the women end up getting shit for all of the you know, all of the men's fucking toxic shortcomings because he can't express his emotions or whatever. And so like, you know, they end up suffering abuse. Because what happens when you can't express your emotions? When you have pent up rage inside, or pent up loneliness or depression or whatever, you act out because you can't hold that shit inside forever. That's why they call it pent-up rage. That's why they call it pent-up loneliness, pent-up emotions, right? Because you have to let them out. It's a human need to express yourself. How many times have you ever heard somebody say, I had to tell somebody? I haven't talked to anyone in so long, I don't even know. I had to fucking tell somebody. And then they lay some shit on you, and you're like, oh, well, dude, you should, like, you know, whatever, get some therapy or something. Can't get therapy, that makes you look weak. Just to let you know that. So this is what ends up happening, is that, yes, women end up becoming the victims of it. They end up becoming the victims of the actions of men who cannot express their emotions. That's 100% true. Matt Walsh is mocking that. Mocking that, because it's like, because why? Because of toxic male masculinity. I keep saying toxic male. It's like male masculinity. It's like, no, toxic masculinity. All right. Sorry. I will do better. Moving on.
She says, quote, women end up being the therapists for their husbands, and more are getting sick of it. Yes, God forbid wives have to listen to their husbands and offer them solace and comfort. They're sick of it, says masculinity expert Niobe. That's not a conflicting message at all, is it? On one hand, men need to open up more, but on the other hand, if they do open up, then they're putting an unfair burden on their wives who are being asked to do too much emotional labor.
Well, maybe if you were better at opening up in the fucking first place, it wouldn't be a big problem, and you wouldn't like be pissing people off when you do. If you're normally open, see, here's the thing. There's the difference, right? Women are not. They seem to handle this much better. Okay, I don't want to say every single woman ever is open about their emotions, because that's not true. But women are much better at opening up at emotions. They'll tell you exactly what they want, right? They'll tell you exactly what they think most of the time. And here's the other thing, is that you get like miscommunications and stuff between the sexes. And it all comes down to the way that they communicate. Women are much more verbal about their communicating. Stuff like that. And they expect you to act a certain way and that kind of thing. And men are just more straightforward. You know how you talk to a man, folks? Especially for the women out there. If you ever have trouble communicating with your husbands or your boyfriends, you know how you talk to a man? With your mouth. You just say exactly what you want. Tell him exactly what you want. Kind of imagine like you're speaking to a dog. That's how you should talk to a man. You know, like you tell your dog, sit, roll over, don't pee on the furniture. And then when your dog pees on the furniture, you hit him with a newspaper. Bad dog, bad dog. That's how you should talk to a man. You say, put down the fucking toilet seat when you take a leak. Right? That kind of thing. Put your goddamn clothes in the hamper. Don't leave your dirty fucking dishes in the sink. Shit like that. And then when the man doesn't do it, you should get a rolled up newspaper and you should smack him in the head. Be like, God damn it, put your fucking thing away. Bad man. That's how you should act, women. Ladies out there. Because that's the thing that if you just like use inferences and shit to try to get a man to do something, is not going to work. Because he's not going to get it. Because he's not trained to do that. You have to train him like an animal. Because that's what men are. Men are fucking animals. But anyway, all joking aside, yeah, why should it be the burden of your mind? Because that's like what he's saying is true. Men only feel emotionally available to someone they're in a romantic relationship with. They substitute that for, and it's like, well, no, your wife is not your fucking therapist. Yeah, if you're having trouble about something, you should be able to talk to your wife or your girlfriend or something. But at the same time, maybe if you were better about expressing your emotions in the fucking first place, then you wouldn't need fucking therapy. Right? Like, I don't know. I don't understand how this... If you're sad about something, say it. Say, hey, I'm sad about something. If you have anxiety about something, say it. If you're unsure about something, if you're afraid of something, say it. Problem is that men don't do that shit. They just let it build up over and over and over. And then they explode into rage and shit like that and throw fucking tantrums. And like, why should your wife or your girlfriend have to put up with your ass if you're throwing a fucking tantrum like a baby? I mean, I agree with that shit 100%. I don't know. Continuing on.
Okay, then. By the way, women, just a quick note. If you feel like you're sick of hearing about your husband's troubles, just keep in mind that he hears about yours about 1,000 times more often.
Yeah. He does hear about it more because, once again, women have no problem expressing themselves. They have no problem. And if it was just the other way around, if maybe men could take a little bit of advice from their wives and their girlfriends and be open about their feelings more often, then maybe we wouldn't have this quote-unquote epidemic to begin with. Let's skip past the fucking ads here, because I don't give a shit about Matt Walsh and his fucking, sponsorships.
Well, a consultant named Mark Green says this, quote, if a boy expresses too much emotion or too much need for connection, is too giddy, is too joyful, what we say to that boy is, what are you, a sissy? What are you, a girl? What are you, gay? It's your job to dominate those around you, or you'll lose status, and that will increase the number of individuals above you who can dish out dominance to you. And what we
100% true. Absolutely 100% true.
find is that in that system, in that structure, men are constantly in competition with each other and constantly driven by this sense of anxiety. So that's the real problem. Too much competition, too much stoicism, too much, men are too combative and aggressive, and we got to calm all that down. Well,
no, that's not, no. See, I like how he automatically takes the absolute incorrect thing from everything. Like, that's kind of when you can tell someone's being disingenuous, when that is not what that said. Okay? That didn't say that men are too competitive or too stoic or whatever, right? What did this actually say? Let's rewind it. Okay, where are we at? 5:59. Let's rewind it back here, right? What does it actually say? If a boy expresses too much emotion or too much need for connection, is too giddy or too joyful, what we say to that boy is, what are you, a sissy? Right? What are you, a girl? What are you, gay? That's what it actually said. What it actually said is that if you try to express yourself, if you're happy, if you're too fucking happy, too joyful, then other men will come and make fun of you and hold you down. And that's exactly what happens, by the way. That's exactly what happens. If you show too much emotion as a young boy, as a young kid, you get bullied. Even as an adult now, if I'm too happy about something, and I'm walking, I'm like, hey, happy, blah, blah, blah. What does your male friend say if you're happy? You know what he'll say? What are you so fucking happy about? That's what he'll say. That's the way they'll frame it. What the fuck are you so happy about, man? Damn. Shut up. And then you have to be like, oh, I'm happy because I won $300 in the lottery or something. You know what I mean? You have to explain yourself. You can't just be like, oh, I just feel happy. No, no, you have to explain why you're so happy. Oh, I'm so happy because I just got a blah, 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 XYZ new car or something like that. It's like, no, you have to have a reason to fucking show happiness. What did he take from that? He just went to this part here where it says, constantly in competition with other, constantly driven by the sense of anxiety. And he goes, oh, there's too much competition. That's the exact wrong thing to take from it. It's almost like he took that incorrect point on purpose, right? This is also true, by the way, that you always feel like you're in competition with other men. That's another reason, by the way, as sort of a side note, sort of a tangent here, that's another reason why all of these stupid fucking incels are always pissed about another woman's body count, as they call it. Because they feel like they're in competition with her prior boyfriends or whatever. That's the whole point behind the body count thing. It's like, I'm not going to date a girl that's had sex with more than X number of men, or, 7 is too many, or whatever, blah, blah, blah. Or in the meantime, they can have as many fucking prior partners as they want. If they had 100 fucking girls that they had sex with, it doesn't fucking matter. But the girl that they want to date, no, it should be 2 or 3, or preferably 0. Because that's what it's all about, because they feel like they're in competition with her prior boyfriends. Oh, she's always going to be comparing me to them. It's like, no, that's why. Why would you even think that? Because you're insecure. You're insecure because you feel like you're in competition with other men. It's like, life is not a competition. I'm not, I specifically myself have consciously made that decision in my own life that I'm never going to compete with anybody else. I'm never going to look at another guy and be like, oh, he makes more money than me. He's got a better house than me, or he's got more talent than me. You know why? Because you're never the best. That's why. You will never be the best at anything out there. There's what, 8 billion people on Earth now? Right? Something like that. There's somebody out there who's better than you at everything. Just keep that in mind. There's always someone who's stronger, someone who's faster, someone who's smarter than you, someone who makes more money, someone who gets, who is able to date women that are more attractive that you will never have a chance with out there. There's always going to be someone who can do everything that you do better. And if you think like that, if that's a big problem with you, if you have to be the best at fucking everything, then you're going to have a shitty life because you're going to lose. Losing is a part of life. You can't win at fucking everything. And if you're basing your like ego on the fact that you're a winner, that's toxic. And you're going to have a shitty fucking life. You're going to have a life filled with lies, because you're going to have to lie to yourself about how you're the fucking best at everything. Of course, you try to do your best, but that should be good enough. This is another part of toxic male masculinity. You have to be the best. You know, get out there, be the best. You have to be number one. All this other shit, you know. There's winners and losers, and you got to be a winner. You know, win, like that kind of thing, right? That's also a big part of toxic masculinity. And it seems like Matt Walsh has fallen for that bit of the toxic masculinity as well. Moving on here.
Driven by this sense of anxiety. So that's the real problem. Too much competition, too much stoicism, too much men are too combative and aggressive, and we got to calm all that down. Well, the problem with this theory is obvious, or it should be. Okay, if a cowboy mentality and too much macho stoicism is what is driving the epidemic of lost and lonely men, then why is the problem getting worse over time? Everyone agrees it's worse now than ever before. I just went through some of the many statistics that prove that. This is a major problem. Yes, men are in bad shape.
No. By the way, it's not worse than over time. It's not. The data doesn't actually show that. What he's saying, there really is no epidemic of loneliness out there. That's not a thing. But here's the other thing, folks, right? Even if there is, it doesn't mean that it's like worse now and that men a few hundred years ago had it any better. No. Plenty of men back in the fucking 19th century or whatever, when cowboys were like, you know, back in fucking like the 1850s and shit, plenty of them were lonely as well. So, continuing.
But if that's all getting worse, then how can we blame traditional notions of masculinity? There's no doubt that it's far less common for boys to be called sissies these days, or labeled gay as a pejorative. I can't remember the last time I saw a boy being lambasted as a sissy because he's being emotional. That almost never happens anymore. Used to be very common.
It is still very common today. I don't know what the fuck he's talking about. Am I wrong there? No, that's extremely common for young boys to treat other boys like, you know, the same kind of toxic masculinity, calling them gay and shit like that, being, you know, calling them a sissy, whatever, what are you, a pussy? No, that's extremely common. When did that change? That didn't fucking change. I mean, I guess, what are you trying to say, like, schools are all liberal and shit now, and, like, is it because feminism changed it? No. That's what we're fucking talking about. I mean, if it wasn't, like, common, we wouldn't be having this conversation. No, it's extremely fucking common. He just made that up. That's the other thing about it. Like, that was just 100% made up bullshit right there. I don't know. Moving on.
And again, it certainly was more common, back in the day, 50 years ago, or any other time in human history. Indeed, historically, the push for a man to be strong and dominant and unemotional was much more pronounced than it is today. In fact, historically, if a man didn't exhibit those traits, then he would die, and his whole family would die. It's only in recent times that it's even been a feasible option for men to be feminine and soft and in touch with their feelings.
I don't know what he's trying to, like, claim there. Why would your whole family die if you were open with your emotions? That doesn't make any sense, right? Now, is he trying to say it's because if men weren't aggressive in the past, that, like, you left yourself open to be killed or whatever? I guess maybe. Being aggressive and all that and not showing your emotions is not necessarily why people were killed in the past. Like, no. See, you read about tragedies in the past, like, okay, a whole village gets wiped out in a war or something. Let's even take the United States, you know. There would be, like, say, a settler tribe or something, since we're talking about Matt Walsh, and he's got a very Eurocentric view of the world and American history. We'll say something like, say, a Native American raid on a colonial settlement goes and kills a bunch of people, something like that. Let's take something like that, because that is a thing that happened. You know, there were wars, Native American wars, that they fought against, you know, native tribes and stuff, and ultimately, like, you know, wiped them out. So let's take something from that point of view, saying, well, if you weren't strong and stoic, your whole family might be wiped out in a war. That's something that Matt Walsh would fucking say, right? But even that, it's like, what does your emotions have to do with warfare? Like, no, you're being strong and stoic against, like, your friend doesn't really have much to do with your survival in warfare. What does that have to do with you being able to defend your family? Let's take a less racist example. Let's take a less racist example and just say a less racist example, and let's just say a war in general. Let's say the War of 1812 or something, or like the Revolutionary War, or something like that, where, you know, the redcoats are coming, and you need to defend your house. Your town is under attack by the British or some shit like that. What does not being able to express your emotions have to do with your entire family getting wiped out in a war? How does that prevent you from pulling a trigger and firing your gun, your musket or whatnot, to prevent, like, your family from being massacred? Kind of sounds to me like that those two things don't have a lot to do with each other. Kind of sounds to me that he is equating expressing your emotions with weakness, when those two things are not, they don't have much to do with each other at all. If you were to take two guys, one guy who can express his emotions and another guy who doesn't, who bottles up his rage, and both of those guys were to train and then fight each other, they were to train for an MMA match and then fight each other in the octagon or whatever, which one of those guys do you think is going to win? The guy who's more mentally adjusted, who's able to make good decisions based on available data, who doesn't have weird rage problems and hang-ups? Or the guy who's, like, got mental problems because he's not able to express himself? I mean, who would you put your money on? Let's say that you're betting $1,000 and you have a psychological profile of your two fighters. Who are you going to put your money on? The guy who's, like, rage, you know, who's got, like, rage problems and, like, is abusive to his, like, wife and shit like that, who's got, like, a history of domestic abuse or whatever because he fucking, like, you know, and, like, problems with the police and everything because he just bottles everything fucking up and then it explodes and he can't fucking handle the shit. And so he just, like, randomly beats up strangers and, like, punches his girlfriend and that kind of... Are you going to bet on that guy? Or are you going to bet on the guy who's, like, well-adjusted and who's, like, training and shit and is going to stay cool under pressure? Because that's what you do when you're well-adjusted, by the way. You're able to handle stress better. Which one of those people are you going to fucking bet on? Right? So, no, it's a misconception, this idea that, you know, once again, what he's doing is that he's equating emotions with weakness. They have nothing to do with a physical weakness. They have nothing to do with, like, emotion. What is an emotional weakness? What? You break down or whatever and start crying, that kind of thing? No, people who break down and start crying over dumb things are people who are not expressing their emotions. Those are the people who have a problem expressing their emotions. Right? If you flip out and start crying over the smallest fucking thing, you're not doing it right. That's wrong. You shouldn't be, you know, right? That's wrong. You should be able to handle, you know, if you watch a movie and it's sad and you start tearing up, that's normal. That's a normal thing. Oh, it's sad, whatever. I was watching, you know, what was it, fucking Yoshinoko the other day, the anime about the pop idol star who, like, gets murdered and her kids get reincarnated, blah blah blah, and she, like, gets murdered and stuff right in front of her children, and it's sad and your eyes start to water up because it's sad, because it's like, Woman killed right in front of her kids. That's a normal, ordinary human reaction, to cry or to feel sad when you see stimulus like that, right? But if you start flipping out, crying and screaming and, oh my God, it's so horrible, and all that shit, no, that's abnormal. Why would you do that? You would only do that if you have other problems, other psychological problems, right? He's equating that with weakness. He's equating the normal, ordinary response that every human being has to that kind of stimuli to weakness, to the overreaction. That's what he's doing. He's doing that because he's a moron. So, anyway, long story short, expressing your emotions does not make you weak.
And it's also in recent times that men have lost all sense of themselves and their purpose and place in the world. Speaking of the cowboy mentality, why didn't actual cowboys have these problems? If a cowboy mentality leads to despair and suicide, then we should find a whole hell of a lot of it when we look back at the latter half of the 19th century, which was the era of the cowboy. But that's not what we find. You know, the post over...
That's not true, by the way. I don't know if you guys know this, but cowboys, settlers, in particular cowboys, had a big problem with loneliness. Did you know that? I only know this because I read a book about it. It was a book about women in the frontier. And this book that I read years and years ago talked about prostitutes and how sometimes prostitutes were the only women that were out there in the frontier. And that's why the prostitutes during those days had a special status. They were like important to the community because there was like, the ratio was like 20 men to 1 woman out there. This is like at the beginning when they were just settling and just, you know, things like boom towns, gold and coal and stuff like that were starting to pop up for the first time when the West was being settled, right? And it was just all men. This is what they would do. They would go out there, they'd build a railroad or whatever, and they would go out and they'd strike gold at some certain place, and a town would pop up, and it would just be all men because they're just prospectors. And there'd be like barely any women, if any at all. And so the women that did come, the first women to show up were prostitutes. Because when there's a bunch of horny men laying around, you can make money. And so that's where women went. And this was back in the day when it was like impossible for women to find work doing anything else. You're either like a seamstress or a prostitute. Like that's all there fucking was for women to do anyway. So lots of enterprising women went out and settled the West and made lots and lots of money being prostitutes. And the thing about it is that it became like this protected status where it was like these towns could not function without prostitution. So it was highly regulated, and a lot of these women became madams and they made lots of money, and the men didn't fuck with them. These women are protected, and not only were they providing a service to the town or whatever, they were also highly, highly respected because it was the only female companionship these men could find. And so lots of these prostitutes ended up fulfilling the roles of therapists. Lonely men would go out, play, and half the time, and this is why you would see like those saloons where it would, like, you know, the stereotypical saloon in a Western where upstairs it's like a brothel and downstairs it's a bar and there's like guys playing cards and shit. That's kind of where this came from. Those were real places where, like, and half the time the prostitutes wouldn't even have sex with the guys. They would just hang out with them and like play cards with them and have a good time with them and have dinner with them and talk to them. And that was a thing that you could pay a woman to come and just have fun with you, just talk to you, and not even have sex. That was a thing that it would be on the menu. Some of the brothels would have like, it would be like you could charge by the sex act. If you want to do this or that, if you want to go backdoor, blah, 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 whatever, you want to get a blowjob, whatever, you could charge by the sex act. And on the menu would be just sitting and talking for an hour, right? just playing cards, just having dinner, just having a few drinks, and then that was it. That was the thing you could go and pay a woman for. Why? Because she would listen to you talk, listen to your problems or whatever. Because even back then, men would not express their emotions with other men. Men would not reveal their deepest, darkest desires and their wants and secrets and all this other shit with other men. They could only do it with women. So even back then, this was a problem. The exact opposite of what Matt Walsh is saying is true. It was a problem then, it's a problem now. It was probably fucking worse then, because there really were, like, especially in the West. Like, when I say West, I mean the American West. Because even then, there was, like, way less women than there were now. So it was probably 10 times fucking worse than it is now. And here's the other thing they don't tell you. Homosexuality was very, very, very common back then in those days because there weren't any women around. The same way that it's sort of acceptable in prisons. If you're in prison and you get in and you have a homosexual relationship with someone, nobody gives you any shit over it because they understand that's what there is. And it's not even about the sex half the fucking time, right? When you go to prison and you talk to actual prisoners who have been in prison and they talk about homosexual relationships, it's not about sex. You know, it's like, yeah, maybe guys get horny, whatever. You know, sexuality is a need. It's a human need to have sex. Yeah, okay. But it's not about that. It's about companionship. That's a thing today. It was a thing back then. And people would overlook those types of indiscretions, I guess, back then. Because that was the reality of the situation. What are you going to do when you're in a place where there's no women around? You have to express, you have to have an outlet for these things somehow. Right? Because these are human need. It's a human need, right? To have a sexual, relationships. That's a human need. It's a human need to just to share your emotions, to have a deep connection with other people. And it doesn't have to be your wife. We are conditioned as men in this country that we're only allowed to have this kind of connection with someone we're having sex with. It doesn't have to be like that. It wasn't like that then. It doesn't have to be like that now. Matt Walsh doesn't understand this shit because he's a moron. Moving on.
Overall thesis can probably be best summarized in this sentence from the article, quote, American men's isolation stems in large part from a pervasive cultural belief, experts say, that men should be self-reliant and hide their emotions, especially from other men. The absurdity of the premise could not be any more clear.
Okay. Why is that absurd? Because that is 100% spot on. But let's listen to why is it absurd.
Would anyone argue that the cultural belief that men should be self-reliant and hide their emotions is more pervasive today than it was half a century ago? Of course not. So again, if that's the cause of the problem, why is the problem worse today? The trends are clearly going the other way. The correlation works entirely.
You see how, all right, you see the bait and switch that he's doing. He's not saying that it's wrong. He's saying it should be worse then than it is now. And it's worse now. But it's not worse now. It's the same as it was then as it is now. That's what he's not getting. The same problem existed in 1850 as it does today. The exact same problem. And he's skirting around that. He's not debating whether the problem exists, because it does exist. He's trying to disprove the argument with an erroneous statement that it wasn't worse then, that it's worse then now than it was then, which is just not true. It is not worse now than it was then. It's the same. If anything, it was worse then than it is now. You see that? You see the bait and switch there? The old switcheroo? How you can get away, like, this is how you can get away with, like, seeming to win an argument when you don't have jack shit. It's basically misdirection, is what Matt Walsh just did. Moving on.
Entirely in the other direction. As society loses traditional notions of masculinity, suicides increase. This is undeniable. It's not debatable. You can try to explain that correlation away all you want, but if you deny it or pretend it doesn't exist, you lose all credibility in this discussion.
Well, that's the thing. Suicide has increased, but is it because of these kinds of alienation? I mean, suicide has always been higher amongst men than it has women, like always, right? Since for decades and decades and decades, men have always killed themselves more than women have. They've always taken their lives in greater numbers, you know, because men are better at it. But anyway, men are better at suicide, right? But still, is it getting worse? I mean, I don't think it is. First off, I don't think we have sufficient like data from 200 years ago or even 100 years ago to say suicide has increased more or it's worse now. I think one thing that we do have is that we have way more people. The population is way larger. In the United States, how many people do we have? 350, 400 million? How many people did we have in 1850? 20 million? 50 million? I think it was 100 million around 1900. So it couldn't have been that much. So what? 4 or 5 times what it was then? I mean, more people are just going to kill themselves when you have more people. That's just the fact. You will have... Is it a higher proportion? Do we have the evidence for that? Do we have actual evidence from 1850, 1860, 1870 about the number of men who committed suicide? I don't think so. I don't even think we have accurate data 100 years ago from 1923. I don't think we started even getting anything close to accurate data on that until maybe the middle of the 20th century. I wouldn't trust any numbers prior to the 40s or the 50s on this. And then even then, there's other factors involved. Loneliness, for example, is largely self-reported. That's how do we know that there's such thing as loneliness in the first place? We go out, you have a poll, are you lonely? And then people have to report that. Yes, I feel lonely. No, I don't. Right? Well, when even the fact of doing that is considered weakness, just even reaching out for help is considered weakness when it comes to toxic masculinity. It's like you're going to get skewed numbers. So I think maybe that's good that so many people are self-reporting it today. Maybe that shows that, hey, maybe we're starting to kind of come across a bend here and it's not considered toxic anymore to fucking ask for help. Because I don't know, that's another thing you guys, you ladies out there need to understand, right? Every man out there listening to this knows this. Even asking for help is considered weakness. Sometimes. Just the fact that you're asking, there are men out there who would never be caught dead going to a therapist. Like even just going to a therapist and asking for it. It's like you obviously have a problem. You're fucking flipping out. You can't, you can't go day by day. You're thinking of fucking killing yourself, whatever. Even just considering going and getting therapy is like some men out there would just be like, that's a step too far. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to go, I don't know, drink. That's what men do. They become alcoholics and shit. I'm just going to go do a bunch of drugs or some shit like that. I'm just going to go, I don't know, beat the crap out of somebody, whatever. Right. Every man out there, you've all met somebody like that who's just like, that's too far. Just even because then that admits that you have a problem. It shows weakness and they can't fucking do that, Anyway, moving on.
Now, these experts are correct that men need fellowship, and men are missing it these days, and that is part of the problem, definitely. But they even miss the point on that end too. Even when they're right, they end up being wrong because they encourage men to fellowship in the way that women fellowship. They tell men to sit around and talk about their feelings, do some yoga, listen to soft music, hold each other and cry. That's not the kind of fellowship men need or want. Okay, we can't expect corporate media's masculinity experts to understand this because their masculinity experts are all effeminate.
Now, he is correct there. Men won't do it. They will not do it. Right? They're not going to sit around and, yes, talk about their feelings. That's the problem. That is what he's saying is like, that's what we need to get over as men. We need to get over that. We need to understand that that's okay. Men won't do it because they see that as weak. What we should be doing is trying to change the culture so that expressing your emotions is no longer seen as being weak. Right. So he's correct there. He's correct there, but how do you do that? Well, I mean, you can't just do it by, I don't know, you can't just force people to do it. You have to change that. It's got to be something that comes from the culture. How? If you have an answer to that, please let me know. I mean, I think you could start by teaching your kids that it's okay to cry, for example. If you're a boy, it's all right to cry. It's okay to be sad about things. It's okay to be happy about things. It's okay to have emotions. I think that is the first way that we can start. And if we teach our kids that, hey, don't be afraid of expressing yourself, and maybe we stop calling them wimps and pussies when they do, maybe shit might change in in a generation or something. That's one way I think we could start.
But any normal man can attest that men tend to bond while engaging in a shared activity. And I don't mean yoga, okay? I mean like one that doesn't require a lot of talking, like sitting and watching the game or fishing or golfing, playing pickup basketball and so on. I went out fishing with my brother-in-law a few weeks ago, and when we came back, my wife asked me what we talked about. And I said, I don't know, nothing really. You didn't talk about anything? You didn't talk about, well, we talked about fishing. You went fishing and you just talked about fishing? What's going on in his life? What's going on? What did you talk about? We didn't talk about much. She was shocked and confused because women don't operate that way. But men and women are not the same. And you cannot hope to help men or offer them any roadmap out of despair if you don't start by acknowledging that basic fact.
All right. Now that one I can comment on. And that really, I think, is bullshit. Okay. Because, when you hang out with your friends, you have your male friends, yeah, you don't talk about some things, but you do talk. So I'm not sure what Matt Walsh is saying there. Is he saying that he doesn't talk to anybody? Like, what did he say? Like, men need ways to bond where they don't talk to each other. I mean, that is the most male toxic fucking thing I've ever seen, right there. It's like, no, you have friends. You don't talk to your friends? I talk to my friends. I mean, what? You talk about, like, your job. You talk about fucking your life. You talk about your relationships. You talk about that funny movie you saw one time. You talk about, I mean, I don't know about you, but even with my guy friends, I talk about all kinds of shit. So I don't know what he means, like, we need ways for men to just not talk about anything. Like, I think that's Matt Walsh's personal problem. If you just went out with your friend fishing and you just sat there and fished and you didn't talk, then guess what? You fucking didn't really do anything. And, like, maybe you need to, like, learn how to open up a little bit. I mean, you didn't sit around and chat about something, then why the fuck did you even go fishing with a friend? If you're not going to talk to him, why did you even bring him? You want to go fishing so you can just sit in a boat and not fucking say anything and just suck beers for 17 hours? Because that's all fishing is. All fishing really is just sitting around drinking beer. Right? That's why guys like doing it so much, because fishing is like the laziest sport ever. You just chill, you drink beer and you wait for the fish to bite, and they never fucking bite. Maybe once in a blue moon you actually catch something. That's why, like, old guys like fishing so much, because it's like the laziest sport ever. But anyway, I mean, I don't know. I don't. That's where we depart ways there, because I don't identify with that shit at all. Like, no, I talk to my actual friends, even if we don't talk about deep emotional stuff, which we don't. But we at least talk about stuff. I at least know what's going on in my friends' lives. I at least like want to hear if he wants to say something like, "Oh, what's going on? Oh yeah, this, that, whatever, blah blah blah. Oh yeah, you know, we this and my house and my mother and blah 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 blah." It's like you at least chat and shoot the shit with him. I mean, is he saying that he doesn't do that at all with his friend? You know, and that's the thing. It's like, I understand sometimes that's the best you can get, and it's like, okay, whatever, right? But is he just not doing that at all? Like, I think Matt Walsh is really a fucking sociopath. Because that sounds like a sociopath to me. Like, come hang out with me and stuff, but don't fucking say anything. And if you say anything, I'm gonna make fun of you. That's like, kind of sounds like Matt Walsh doesn't have any friends. Like, maybe he needs to fucking go out and meet some people. Maybe he needs to get some fucking friends. I don't know. That's all I can stand of this fucking asshole. There's 2 minutes left, but who cares? Let's get rid of this douchebag before I fucking vomit. Turn that shit off. Long story short, folks, if there is a quote-unquote male loneliness epidemic, it's not any different than anything that's happened in the past. It's not any worse than it's been. Conceivably, it has probably been way fucking worse in the recent past. When I say that, I mean 100, 200 years ago. We have no way of knowing. Don't listen to these morons. Don't listen to these assholes when they tell you it's worse now. It's not. And it is entirely 100% the fault of men. If you want to be lonely, you know, if you don't want to be lonely, then you know what you got to do. You have to actually go out and talk to people, right? And I understand it's hard. It's not easy. It's not. You can't just walk outside, start talking to fucking random people. They'll look at you like you're crazy. It's not easy, but it is easier than ever to make friends nowadays. You know, if you're interested in relationships, with, you know, romantic relationships, that's easier than ever. There are apps that will tell you if there's women out there who are single, who are even looking just to hook up. It's like, I wish I would have had that shit 20 years ago when I was like dating and stuff. 10 years ago. Well, yeah, I've been married for 10 years, yeah. So I'll say 11 years ago when I was dating. Right. I wish I would have had the, you know, shit like fucking Tinder and all that. I would have got so many more women. Anyway, you know, you straight up have a thing. It'll say if she's there, if she's single, if she's available, and what she wants. It's like, dude, they're fucking handing you the keys to the kingdom. It's way easier than, you know, used to be. You have to actually go up and have game and all that. You don't even game anymore. You just send a fucking message and she replies. It's like, fuck, you know, there's websites, you know, fucking like dating websites and shit. Use this stuff, right? But it's not just about meeting women. It's like, you want to, you know, if you're lonely, if you're genuinely lonely, if you genuinely are, and you just want companionship, you just want friendship, then it's easier nowadays than ever to make friends. You can go on Meetup. You can find groups of people that are interested in the things that you're interested in, right? And go out there and meet them. And it takes effort. That's the thing, is that it's not going to happen if you're just staying at home playing fucking video games all day. Like, no, you got to turn off the Xbox. You got to shut down Steam or whatever. Turn off the PlayStation 4 or PlayStation 5 if you have one or whatever. And make an effort to get out and meet people. Meet people who share the same interests as you. The more people you meet, the more friends you acquire, right? The more chances for deep, actual emotional connections you make, whether you just want friendship or whether you want a romantic relationship or whatever. That's how you got to do it. And it is easier now to do that. It was way harder in the past when you had to actually go into these things blind. When you wanted to go to something, you would just have to find out wherever it was, however the fuck you could, and then just show up and hope there were people there that you can meet with. It's like, no, dude, it's way easier now. So it just takes effort. It takes effort and a willingness to not blame other people for your fucking problems. And that's ultimately what male, toxic masculinity is really all about. Toxic masculinity at its core is children. It's the way that children act and see the world. It's what young boys are taught. And it's basically taking the same shit you learned in the schoolyard when you were 11 years old and translating that to an adult. It's like you never learned since 5th grade how to interact with people, because that's what it is. Like, toxic masculinity is essentially fucking like childish. It's the rantings and ravings of a spoiled child who wants the world to conform to his wants and needs, wants the world to serve him without putting any effort into it. That's what it all is. So, I don't know. So when women on Twitter tell you to fucking grow up, they have a point.